The sun rose lazily over the parched lands of Dry Creek Valley, painting with gold the cracked earth that stretched as far as the eye could see. Robert Walker adjusted the worn hat on his head and sighed deeply, observing the empty pastures that once were green and abundant. The drought had lasted 5 months, and with it, the family's hopes were dwindling like the waters of the creek. "Dad, where are you going so early?" Tommy's gentle voice echoed through the quiet morning. The 10-year-old boy appeared at the door of their simple house, rubbing his sleepy eyes. "Going to check the creek, son. Maybe there's still a trickle of water down there." Robert forced a smile, but couldn't hide the worry he carried on his hunched shoulders. In the kitchen, Sarah stirred an almost empty pot, trying to stretch what little beans remained for another meal. Her black hair, once shiny, now seemed as dull as the hope that stubbornly refused to fade completely. "Rob, we need to talk when you get back," she said, without lifting her eyes from the pot. The grave tone in his wife's voice made the man pause at the doorway. "Is it about what we discussed yesterday?" he asked, lowering his voice so Tommy wouldn't hear. Sarah merely nodded. The offer from the businessman in town to buy the property for a pittance was always present in their minds, like a shadow following them. It was little money, but perhaps it was the only way out to start over somewhere else. Robert kissed his wife's forehead and headed down the dusty trail. His steps raised small clouds of red dust that danced in the morning air. The silence of the valley was broken only by the distant song of a mockingbird and the dull sound of his worn boots. Arriving at the creek, he found the bed almost dry, only a few puddles of muddy water bravely resisting the relentless sun. That's when he spotted the motionless form on the bank. He approached cautiously, his heart racing. A horse lay there so thin that its ribs were visible beneath its dull coat. The animal was breathing with difficulty, one of its front legs clearly injured. Its eyes, though dimmed by suffering, still held a spark that touched something deep in Robert's chest. "Poor thing," he murmured, kneeling beside the animal. "How did you end up here, huh?" Instinctively, he reached for the pocket knife in his pocket. In the region, everyone knew that prolonging the suffering of an injured animal was cruel, but when he raised his hand, something extraordinary happened. The horse, with an effort that seemed to consume its last strength, turned its head and gently licked Robert's palm. That simple gesture, that demonstration of trust amid despair, changed everything. Robert put away the knife and gently stroked the animal's muzzle. "You want to live, don't you?" he whispered. "Then let's try." Getting the horse home was a complicated operation. Robert improvised a stretcher with branches and pieces of tarp, carefully pulling the injured animal. The horse didn't resist, as if it understood it was being helped. When he reached the yard, Sarah came running from the house, followed closely by Tommy. "Robert, for heaven's sake, what have you done?" Her voice came out louder than intended, filled with desperation. "We barely have enough to eat and you bring another mouth to feed? Mom, just look at him." Tommy approached the horse without fear, his eyes shining with curiosity. "He's hurt, but look how beautiful he is." "Beautiful doesn't fill stomachs, boy." Sarah crossed her arms, but Robert could see she was also touched by the animal's condition. "Sarah, I know this isn't the time for this, but—" Robert took off his hat, running his hand through his graying hair. "He asked for help. When a living being asks for help, we can't turn our backs." The horse was accommodated in the small shed that once stored feed. Tommy insisted on staying nearby, talking softly to the animal as if it were an old friend. To everyone's surprise, the horse seemed calmer in the boy's presence. That night, while Sarah and Robert whispered about their uncertain future, Tommy slept next to the shed, watching over the restless sleep of the mysterious horse that had arrived as another burden but carried secrets they couldn't yet imagine. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give us a like. Tell us what city you're watching from. We'll continue. The first rays of sun found Tommy already awake, sitting beside the horse. The boy had spent the entire night watching the animal's labored breathing, whispering words of comfort whenever it grew restless. "Good morning, big guy," he murmured, extending his small hand to caress the horse's muzzle. "Today you're going. To feel better, you'll see." Sarah appeared at the shed door with a bucket of water and a few handfuls of dry hay she'd managed to find. "Tommy, did you sleep out here?" Her voice carried a mixture of concern and tenderness. "Come have breakfast, son." "He won't eat, Mom." Tommy pointed to the remnants of hay he had offered during the night. "And he won't drink water either. I think he's too sad." Sarah sighed and knelt beside her son. The horse indeed seemed indifferent to any attempt at feeding, but its eyes followed Tommy's every movement with an almost human attention. "Maybe he just needs time, son." She ran her hand through the boy's tousled hair. "But you need to eat. Something too, come on." During breakfast, which consisted of little more than weak coffee and a piece of brown sugar, Robert pensively watched the shed where the horse was through the window. "There's something strange about that animal," he commented, absent-mindedly stirring his coffee. "His coat, when I cleaned off the dust, I saw it was different, sort of chestnut with golden highlights. It's not a common horse." "Rob, expensive horse or cheap horse, the problem's the same." Sarah sighed heavily. "How are we going to feed him when we can barely feed ourselves?" "I know, honey, I know." He shook his head. "But something tells me this horse didn't show up here by accident." That afternoon, while Robert went out to check the hunting traps he had set, Tommy returned to the shed. This time he brought some drawings he had made on pieces of brown paper. "Look what I drew for you," he said, showing the scribbles to the horse. "This is you running free across the field, and this is you drinking water from the full creek." "Two?" The boy's surprise. The horse turned its head toward the drawings as if really looking at them. Encouraged, Tommy continued talking. "You know, I always wanted a horse. My dad said when I grow up and the farm gets better, maybe we could buy one." He paused. "But I guess you already have an owner, right? Someone must be looking for you." It was then that Tommy noticed something different in the straw where the horse was lying. There was an object that wasn't there before, an old saddle crafted with fine details that contrasted with its weathered appearance. "Where did this come from?" he murmured, moving closer to examine it better. The saddle had delicate engravings on the edges and a small compartment under the seat that seemed deliberately discreet. Carefully, Tommy opened the compartment. Inside he found a silk handkerchief embroidered with letters he could barely read, NB, and a piece of yellowed paper partially destroyed by moisture. "Mom! Dad! Come see!" he shouted, but immediately regretted it when the horse became agitated at the noise. "Sorry, big guy," he whispered, lowering his voice again. When Sarah came running, followed by Robert returning from his empty traps, Tommy showed them his discovery. "Look what I found. The horse had this hidden." Robert carefully took the paper, trying to decipher the faded words. He could only make out a few: return, trust, and freedom. "This looks like a note," he murmured, bringing the paper closer to the light. "And these initials, NB, must be the owner's name." Sarah examined the silk handkerchief, feeling the quality of the fabric between her fingers. "This is expensive stuff, Rob. Pure silk, hand-embroidered. This horse doesn't belong to simple folk like us." "You think he escaped from some big ranch?" asked Tommy, concerned. "Will they come looking for him?" Robert carefully folded the paper and kept it with the handkerchief. "For now, he stays with us. He's too weak to travel anyway." He looked at the horse, which was now watching them with renewed attention. "But we'll keep an eye out. If someone comes looking, we'll talk." That night, Tommy again insisted on sleeping near the shed. This time Sarah allowed it, but made sure to bring blankets and stay nearby. It was then they noticed something peculiar. The horse, whenever it managed to stand, directed its gaze to the same point, east, toward the distant mountains. "He's looking toward his home," Tommy whispered, following the animal's gaze. "He must be homesick." But there was something in the horse's behavior that went beyond homesickness. It was as if he was waiting for something or someone, and that mysterious note seemed to carry secrets that were beginning to awaken the curiosity of the entire family. A week had passed since the horse's arrival, and Tommy had become its unofficial guardian. The boy spent hours talking to the animal, which gradually showed signs of physical improvement, although it still refused to eat properly. "You know, Thunder," said Tommy, finally giving the horse a name, "I think you're keeping a very important secret." He stroked the animal's neck. "But don't worry, I won't tell anyone until you're ready." The interesting thing was that the horse seemed to respond to the name. Its ears would move whenever Tommy said Thunder, and its eyes would sparkle with a recognition that went beyond coincidence. Sarah watched from the kitchen window, torn between worrying about finances and the affection she was beginning to feel for the animal. Robert had managed to catch 2 small armadillos in his traps, which would provide protein for a few days, but the situation remained critical. "Rob," she called when her husband came in for lunch, "a letter came today. From the bank." Robert's face immediately darkened. He knew it wasn't good news. With trembling hands, he opened the envelope and quickly read the contents. 60 days, he murmured, dropping into a chair. "They're giving us 60 days to pay off the debt or they'll foreclose." Sarah felt the world spin. It was less time than they had imagined. "What about the businessman from town?" she asked, referring to the offer to buy the property. "He offered way too little." "Not even enough to pay what we owe." Robert sighed deeply. "Maybe if we talk to him again." The conversation was interrupted by barks from the neighbor's dog and the sound of a car approaching. Visitors were rare, especially ones arriving in a vehicle. Through the window they saw a black sedan stop in the yard, raising a cloud of red dust. 2 men got out of the car, one middle-aged, well-dressed despite the heat, and another whom Robert recognized immediately. "Mr. Davis?" Robert went out to greet the visitors, surprised to see an old acquaintance from the region. "Robert, my friend." Mr. Davis smiled, but there was something forced in his expression. "This here is Mr. Norton, a lawyer from the city. He's looking for something you might be able to help with." Mr. Norton introduced himself with a firm handshake and a professional smile. His clothes were expensive, and his small, penetrating eyes discreetly examined everything around. "Mr. Walker, I came here because I heard you might have found a lost horse." His voice was polite, but there was a poorly disguised urgency. "An animal of great sentimental value to my client." Sarah joined the group, holding Tommy by the hand. The boy looked suspiciously at the strangers. "What kind of horse?" asked Robert, cautious. "A rare specimen, chestnut coat with golden highlights, disappeared a few months ago during a severe storm." Mr. Norton took some photos from the inside pocket of his jacket. "It belongs to Mr. Nathan Blackwood, from a traditional family in the interior of Kentucky." The photos clearly showed a horse identical to Thunder, and one of the images displayed the same ornate saddle that Tommy had found. The boy squeezed his mother's hand tighter. Something about these men made him uneasy, though he couldn't explain. "What?" "The animal is still very weak," said Robert, choosing his words carefully. "He arrived here barely alive. I don't know if he could handle a trip." "Oh, don't worry about that," Mr. Norton waved his hand dismissively. "We have specialized veterinarians and proper transport, and naturally the Blackwood family wants to reward those who took such good care of the animal." The mention of a reward made Sarah's eyes sparkle for a moment, but Robert remained cautious. "May I see the horse?" asked Mr. Norton, already heading toward the shed. "No!" Tommy's voice came out louder than intended. Everyone turned to look at the boy, who blushed but stood firm. He doesn't like strangers. He gets very agitated." It was true. Whenever anyone outside the family approached, Thunder showed signs of nervousness. Mr. Norton smiled, but his eyes remained cold. Of course. Traumatized animals need care." He handed a card to Robert. "But we can't leave the poor animal suffering far from home. How about if I come back tomorrow with the veterinarian?" After the visitors departed, the family gathered in the kitchen. Tommy was visibly disturbed. "Dad, I didn't like them," said the boy. "And neither did Thunder. When they arrived, he got all nervous, trying to hide." Robert thoughtfully turned the card between his fingers. "There's something strange about this story," he murmured. "If the horse is so valuable, why didn't anyone come looking before? And that lawyer, it seemed like he knew exactly where to find us." Sarah looked out the window toward the shed, where Thunder now remained restless, walking in small circles, always looking in the direction the visitors had departed. "Rob," she said softly, "what if they're lying?" The night brought unease to the Walker family. Tommy had insisted on sleeping in the shed, claiming that Thunder was very nervous after the stranger's visit. Sarah and Robert whispered in the kitchen, trying to decide what to do. "That man gave me the chills," confessed Sarah, serving reheated coffee to her husband. "And did you see how Tommy reacted? The boy has good intuition. Yeah. And another thing. Robert showed the lawyer's card again. This address here is in Louisville, not the Kentucky countryside like he said. Why would a city lawyer come after a lost horse? The next morning, Robert made a decision that surprised the family. We're going to Riverdale today. Me, you, and Tommy. Riverdale? Rob, we don't have money to be spending on travel, protested Sarah. It's not an expense, honey, it's an investment. He carefully stored the handkerchief and note found with Thunder. If this horse is really as valuable as they say, I need to know the truth before handing him over to just anyone. The trip to Riverdale was made in the pickup of a trucker known in the region. Tommy brought some drawings he had made of Thunder, hoping to show them to someone who might recognize the animal. Their first stop was at the town library, an old building where Ms. Eleanor, the librarian, was known for keeping practically the entire region's history in her memory. Nathan Blackwood, she repeated the name, adjusting her glasses while thinking. That name sounds familiar. Let me check the newspaper archives. While she searched, Tommy explored the library, fascinated by the books about horses he found on the children's shelves. That's when he overheard two elderly ladies talking softly at a nearby table. They said he vanished after all those allegations, one of them murmured. Poor young man, discovering his own family was involved in those dirty contracts. Yes, and his horse disappeared too. They say he cared more for that animal than for people, replied the other. Tommy approached discreetly, pretending to look for a book. Excuse me, ladies. Are you talking about Mr. Nathan Blackwood? He asked with the natural directness of children. The two looked at each other, surprised. You know him, boy? No, but we found a horse that might be his, explained Tommy. Do you know where he is? Ah, child, nobody knows. It's been months since he disappeared. One of the ladies lowered her voice further. They say he discovered some wrongdoings by his family with mining companies and was outraged. He was trying to expose them when he vanished. Miss Eleanor returned with a stack of old newspapers. Found it, she said, opening a newspaper from 6 months ago. Look at this. The headline read, Heir of Traditional Family Questions Environmental. Contracts. There was a photo of a young man with dark hair and determined eyes, next to a horse that was unmistakably Thunder. This is him, said Miss Eleanor. Nathan Blackwood, youngest son of a very rich and powerful family. But he was always different from the others, more concerned with justice than with money. Robert quickly read the article. It talked about irregularities in mining contracts, suspicions of corruption, and Nathan's solitary fight to expose the truth. And what happened to him? Asked Sarah. Disappeared during a very strong storm. About 4 months ago, they found his car abandoned on a dirt road but never found the body. Miss Eleanor sighed. The family says he might have had an accident, but many people think he's hiding somewhere. Tommy grabbed his father's arm. Dad, what if Thunder knows where he is? The afternoon was spent visiting Miss Martha, an old housekeeper who had worked for the Blackwood family for decades before retiring in Riverdale. The white-haired woman with hands marked by time immediately recognized the embroidered handkerchief. This belongs to young Nathan, yes, sir, she exclaimed, emotional. I embroidered these initials myself when he turned 15, and this note... She examined the yellowed paper. Looks like his handwriting, but very hurried. Do you think he's alive? Asked Robert. Ah, my son, that boy was too smart to die in a simple accident. Miss Martha shook her head. He always said if he ever needed to disappear, he'd leave a message with someone he trusted. And that horse, oh Lord, how he loved that animal. How so? Insisted Tommy. Thunder was trained by Nathan himself from a young age. That horse obeys special commands, you understand? She smiled affectionately. Once I saw the boy teach the animal to search for hidden objects, to follow trails. It was a friendship that touched the heart. During the trip back, the family remained silent, processing everything they had discovered. The mystery of the horse had become much bigger than they had imagined. Rob, said Sarah when they were almost home, do you think that lawyer is really from Nathan's family? Now I'm certain he's not, he replied, determined. And tomorrow when he comes back we'll be prepared with some questions of our own too. Tommy looked out the pickup window, eager to reunite with Thunder and tell him everything he had discovered about his former owner. He was sure the horse held important secrets, and now he was beginning to understand why he always looked east with such intensity. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give us a like. Tell us what city you're watching from. We'll continue. The sun was already high when the black sedan appeared again in the Walkers' yard. This time, Mr. Norton was accompanied not only by Mr. Davis, but also by two other men who remained in the car. Robert was waiting, seated on the porch with a cup of coffee in his hands and a much more serious expression than the day before. Sarah and Tommy observed from the window as they had planned. "Good morning, Mr. Walker." Mr. Norton got out of the car with the same professional smile, but there was impatience in his movements. "I brought the veterinarian as promised. We can take the animal today." "I'm glad you came back, sir." Robert didn't stand up, maintaining a calm tone. "Because I also have some questions to ask." Mr. Norton's expression faltered for a moment. "Questions?" "Well, of course, but what kind of questions?" "First, I'd like to know why you lied about where you work." Robert pulled the card from his pocket. "This address is in Louisville, not rural Kentucky." Mr. Davis shifted uncomfortably, avoiding looking directly at Robert. "Well, I have offices in several cities," stammered Mr. Norton. "The Blackwood family has business throughout the region." "Is that so?" Robert rose slowly. "And tell me something. How did you know exactly where to find me? Nobody around here knew I had found a horse." The silence that followed was tense. The two men in the car got out and positioned themselves near the sedan, clearly not being veterinarians. "Mr. Walker," Mr. Norton's voice grew colder, "I think you're complicating a very simple situation. We just want to recover an animal that belongs to our client." "Your client?" Robert crossed his arms. "And do you happen to know that your client has been missing for months? That he was investigating corruption in his own family?" Mr. Norton's mask of cordiality fell completely. "I see you've been gathering information about matters that don't concern you." His voice took on a threatening tone. "That can be dangerous for a simple man like yourself." It was then that Tommy appeared at the door, holding some papers in his hands. "Dad, I found more things about Nathan," he said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "There's even a photo of him with Thunder in the newspaper." Mr. Norton stepped forward, his eyes fixed on the papers Tommy was holding. "Boy, why don't you give me those papers? They might contain important information." "No." Tommy's voice came out firm, surprising even himself. "You're not who you say you are. Ms. Martha explained everything to me." "Ms. Martha?" Mr. Norton exchanged a worried look with his companions. "The former housekeeper of the Blackwood family," explained Robert, watching their reaction. "She knows Nathan very well, and she also knows all the lawyers who work for the family. She's never heard of you." The situation was becoming tense when Sarah emerged from the house, carrying an old shotgun that was rarely used. "I think you'd better leave," she said, with a calmness that contrasted with the weapon in her hands. "And don't come back." Mr. Norton backed up a few steps, but his gaze remained fixed on the shed, where Thunder was. "You don't know who you're messing with," he growled. "That horse has information that could harm very powerful people. It's not just a pet." "What kind of information?" asked Robert. "Nothing that simple people like you need to know," Mr. Norton signaled to his companions. "But I'll give you one. Last chance. Hand over the horse and forget everything you discovered. In exchange, I can help with your debts." "How do you know about our debts?" Sarah's voice came out sharp. A cruel smile formed on Mr. Norton's face. "We know a lot about you, Walker family. We know about the mortgage, about the deadline you have to pay it off. It would be a shame to lose this property that's been in the family for so long." "Are you threatening us?" Robert stepped forward. "I'm offering a business opportunity." Mr. Norton adjusted his jacket. "Think about it. A wounded horse for this entire property doesn't seem like a good deal to me." At that moment, a loud and prolonged neigh came from the shed. Thunder was clearly agitated, as if sensing the tension in the air. Tommy ran toward the shed, ignoring his parents' shouts. When he got there, he found Thunder standing, alert, looking directly at the visitors. But there was something different about his behavior. He didn't seem frightened, but rather protective. "It's okay, Thunder," whispered Tommy. "They're leaving now." To everyone's surprise, the horse left the shed, limping slightly but with a proud posture. He positioned himself between the Walker family and the visitors, like a guardian. "Mister." Norton looked at the horse with an expression that mixed greed and frustration. "That animal knows things that could destroy entire families," he murmured, more to himself than to others. "Then maybe he should stay far away from those who want." "How to destroy families?" replied Robert. With a brusque wave, Mr. Norton indicated to his companions that it was time to leave. "This isn't over," he said, getting into the car. "You have a week to reconsider your decision." After the sedan disappeared down the dusty road, the family gathered around Thunder. The horse seemed calmer, but his eyes remained alert. "Dad," said Tommy, stroking the animal's neck, "I think Thunder really knows where Nathan is. And I think these men know that too." That night, no member of the Walker family managed to sleep well. Mr. Norton's threats echoed in their minds, but there was something bigger keeping them awake, the certainty that Thunder was the key to unraveling. A mystery that could change everything. Tommy was the first to express what everyone was thinking. "Dad, we need to find out where Nathan is," he said during breakfast. "Thunder knows, I'm sure of it. He keeps looking toward the mountains." Robert pensively stirred his coffee. The financial situation remained desperate, with only a few weeks before the bank foreclosed on the mortgage. But now there was more at stake. "Rob," Sarah placed her hand on her husband's arm, "what if those men come back with more people? What if they hurt Tommy?" "That's exactly why we can't stay here waiting," he replied, making a decision that surprised the family. "We're going to follow Thunder. If he really knows where Nathan is, maybe we can help." "Help how?" asked Sarah. "That young man was fighting against corruption, wasn't he? If he has evidence, documents, something that could incriminate powerful people, that's why they want the horse." Robert stood up, determined. "And what if we help him expose the truth?" Tommy clapped his hands, excited. "That's it! And Thunder can lead us to him." The preparations were simple, since they had little to take. Some clothes, what little food remained, water and Sarah's shotgun. Tommy insisted on bringing his drawings of Thunder and the documents they had discovered. When they released Thunder from the improvised enclosure, the horse immediately headed in the direction he always looked, east toward the Blue Ridge Mountains. Although he still limped slightly, he was visibly stronger and more determined. "Look at him," murmured Sarah, impressed. "It's as if he knows the time has come." The journey began in the middle of the afternoon, to avoid the most intense heat. Thunder walked ahead, occasionally stopping to check if the family was following him, but always firmly resuming the direction toward the mountains. "Dad, how do you think Thunder learned to do this?" asked Tommy, fascinated by the horse's behavior. "Ms. Martha said Nathan trained him from a young age. Must have taught the animal to find places, follow trails." Robert watched attentively every movement of the animal. "Horses are intelligent, son, more than we imagine." As they advanced, the landscape gradually changed. The dry, rocky terrain gave way to denser vegetation, and the air became slightly fresher. Thunder seemed to renew his energy with each step. When night fell, they camped near a small stream that still had running water. Thunder drank at length, the first time they had seen him eat properly since he had arrived at the farm. "Look," whispered Tommy. "He's becoming himself again." During the night, Robert kept watch while the family slept. Thunder remained awake too, his ears always alert, as if he were a second guardian. "You know we're doing the right thing, don't you?" murmured Robert to the horse. "Your owner needs us." Thunder turned his head toward Robert and whinnied softly, a sound that seemed like agreement. The next morning they resumed the journey. Thunder was clearly more animated, and his leadership became even more evident. At one point he stopped in front of two trails that divided and deliberately chose the left one, an almost invisible path that climbed up the mountainside. "He knows this path," observed Sarah. "He must have been through here before." After 2 hours of steep climbing. They reached a plateau where the view extended for miles. Thunder stopped and neighed loudly, a sound that echoed through the mountains. To everyone's surprise, there was a response, a distant neigh that came from the direction of a waterfall they could hear, but not see. "Someone's there," whispered Tommy, excited. Thunder resumed walking with renewed vigor, heading straight for the sound of water. The trail became increasingly narrow and dangerous, but the horse navigated safely, occasionally looking back to ensure the family was following him. Finally, they reached the waterfall. The water fell from a considerable height, forming a crystal-clear natural pool, but what most caught their attention was an opening in the rock, partially hidden by the curtain of water. "A cave," murmured Robert. Thunder headed directly to the entrance of the cave, stopping at the edge of the water and neighing again. This time the response came clearly from inside the cave, a human voice. "Thunder, is that you, my friend?" A man appeared at the entrance of the cave, thin and with a grown beard, but with eyes bright with joy. He was unmistakably the same young man from the newspaper photos, though marked by months of isolation. "Nathan Blackwood?" called Robert, hardly believing what he was seeing. The man observed them cautiously, but when he saw Thunder running toward him with difficulty because of his injured leg, his eyes filled with tears. "My old friend," he whispered, embracing the horse's neck. "I knew you would make it, I always knew." Tommy was the first of the family to approach. "Mr. Blackwood, we took care of Thunder. He was badly hurt when we found him." Nathan looked at the boy, then at Robert and Sarah, slowly understanding the situation. You saved my life," he said, his voice breaking. "Literally, if you hadn't taken care of Thunder." "He brought us here," said Robert, "but there are people looking for him." "Dangerous people." Nathan's face hardened. "I know, that's why I'm hiding." He gestured for them to enter the cave. "Come in, we have a lot to talk about, and I have something very important to show you." The cave was more spacious than it appeared. From outside, with several natural chambers that Nathan had adapted for his survival, there was a sleeping area, another for preparing food, and a third that functioned as an improvised office, with carefully organized papers on a table made of flat stones. "You must be wondering why a man hides in a cave for months," said Nathan, serving fresh water to his visitors. "The answer is here." He led the family to the area he used as an office. On the stone table there were dozens of documents, photographs, and meticulously organized spreadsheets. "This represents 3 years of investigation," explained Nathan, running his hand over the documents. "I discovered that my own family, along with businessmen and politicians, was involved in an illegal mining scheme that destroyed springs and contaminated rivers throughout the region." Tommy approached, fascinated by the maps and photos showing environmental devastation. "And they did this on purpose?" asked the boy. "Worse than that, son. They knew about the damage and continued anyway, because the profits were enormous." Nathan picked up a specific folder. "Here are fake contracts, fraudulent environmental reports, payments to public officials, all documented." Robert examined some documents, impressed with the amount of evidence. "Why didn't you take this to the police?" Nathan smiled bitterly. "I did, to 3 different police stations and to the federal prosecutor's office, but the scheme was so extensive that it included people everywhere. Whenever I tried to make a complaint, it disappeared or was archived for lack of evidence." "Is that why you disappeared?" asked Sarah. "No, I disappeared because I discovered they were going to try to silence me permanently." Nathan stroked Thunder, who remained by his side. "On the night of the storm, I received a warning from someone in the family who still had a conscience. They said I had just a few hours before they came for me. And Thunder, my faithful companion here, was trained from a young age for emergency situations." Nathan smiled fondly at the horse. "He knew exactly where to find me if I needed to disappear. But that night, the storm separated us." Tommy looked at Thunder with renewed admiration. "He's been looking for you all this time?" "I believe so. And when you found him, he must have waited to recover before bringing me help." Nathan went to another corner of the cave. "But I haven't shown you the most important thing yet." He moved some rocks, revealing an old chest buried in the cave floor. Carefully, he opened the lid, revealing more documents, but these seemed different from the others. "Here is the definitive evidence," he said reverently. "Recordings of conversations, bank transfers, direct orders to falsify reports, everything needed to dismantle the entire network." Robert immediately understood the magnitude of what he was seeing. That's why those men wanted Thunder so badly. They knew he could lead someone to you. Exactly. Without this evidence, they're safe. With me disappeared, they thought the problem had been solved. Nathan carefully closed the chest. But they didn't count on the loyalty of a horse and the kindness of a family of strangers. Sarah approached gently, touching Nathan's arm. "Mr. Blackwood, what do you plan to do now?" "That's what I need to decide. Alone, I have no way to get this evidence to the right authorities, but with help," he looked at each family member, "maybe it's possible." "Count us in," said Robert without hesitation. "After what we've been through, after the threats we received, this is our problem now too." Tommy, who had been quietly examining some documents, raised his head. "Mr. Blackwood, what are these companies here?" He pointed to a list of names. "Mineral Corp, Agrivale, Clear River. They're shell companies, son, created just to hide." "Where the dirty money comes from?" Nathan took the sheet. "But why do you ask?" "Because I saw this name in our region." Tommy thought for a moment. "The man who wants to buy my dad's farm works for Agrivale." The silence that followed was profound. Nathan looked at Robert with an expression of growing understanding. "Your property. They want your property," he murmured. "I bet there are clean water springs on your land." "There are," confirmed Robert. "Several. Even with the drought. Now they're still flowing. Then it's no coincidence they showed up looking for Thunder at your house." Nathan began pacing back and forth. "They must have discovered the horse was with you and saw a double opportunity. Recover Thunder and acquire another strategic property." Sarah understood the implications. "You mean they knew about our financial situation?" "Certainly. These people have information about everything happening in the region." Nathan stopped pacing and looked directly at the family. "But now you know the truth, and together we can do something I couldn't do alone." "What exactly?" asked Robert. Nathan smiled for the first time since they had met him, a smile that mixed determination and hope. "We're going to expose everything, but not the way I tried before. This time we'll ensure the evidence reaches the public directly, the national press, the federal prosecutor's office." He looked at Thunder. "And we'll use their own greed against them." "How?" asked Tommy, his eyes shining with curiosity. "By pretending you've agreed to hand over Thunder," explained Nathan. "When they come to get him, we'll be ready. With cameras, witnesses, journalists, everything we need to make it impossible to cover up the scandal." For the first time in months, the Walker family glimpsed not just the hope of saving their property, but of being part of something much bigger, the fight for justice and for the protection of the environment that sustained their lives. The plan was carefully developed over 2 nights in the cave. Robert would return to the farm and send a message to Mr. Norton, pretending the family had decided to hand over Thunder in exchange for payment of their debts. Meanwhile, Nathan would use his remaining contacts to alert journalists and federal authorities about what was about to happen. "Remember," said Nathan on the morning of departure, "the most important thing is to ensure everything is recorded. Once this story becomes public, they won't be able to silence us anymore." Tommy hugged Thunder with tears in his eyes. "You'll come back to us, won't you?" he whispered in the horse's ear. Thunder whinnied softly and licked the boy's face as if understanding they would soon be together again. The return to the farm was tense. Robert sent the message through Mr. Davis, informing him he was ready to negotiate. The response came the same day. Mr. Norton would arrive the next morning with the money. Meanwhile, Sarah and Tommy discreetly prepared the cameras borrowed from a journalist friend of Nathan's, hiding them at strategic points around the yard. On the appointed morning, 3 cars arrived at the property. Mr. Norton got out of the first vehicle with a briefcase in his hands and his usual fake smile. 6 men descended from the other cars, clearly not lawyers or veterinarians. "Mr. Walker," Mr. Norton theatrically opened his arms, I see you made the sensible decision. Is the money there? Asked Robert, pointing to the briefcase. Of course, $50,000 as agreed. He opened the briefcase, showing the bundles of cash. Where's the animal? Tommy appeared leading Thunder, who walked calmly but with alert eyes. The horse seemed to understand his role in the plan. Finally, murmured Mr. Norton, his eyes gleaming with greed. That damned horse gave us a lot of trouble. Why is this horse so important? Asked Robert, following the script they had planned. Mr. Norton approached Thunder, examining him as if he were merchandise. Let's say he knows where to find things that shouldn't be found, he said, distracted. That idiot Nathan trained the beast very well. Nathan, the young man who disappeared, insisted Robert. Disappeared? Mr. Norton laughed sinisterly. How he didn't disappear, my friend. We made him disappear. And now with this horse we'll find where he hid all those inconvenient documents. It was at that moment that Tommy gave the agreed-upon signal, discreetly waving to the bushes where journalists were hidden with their cameras. And what do you plan to do when you find the documents? Asked Sarah, keeping the conversation going. Destroy everything, of course. Mr. Norton didn't realize he was being recorded. That meddling do-gooder almost ruined a multi-million-dollar business, but with him out of the way and without the evidence. Without the evidence, what? Nathan's strong voice echoed across the yard. Mr. Norton turned sharply, his face paling when he saw Nathan emerge from the woods, accompanied by federal agents and journalists with cameras. Impossible, muttered Mr. Norton, backing away. Very. Possible, said Nathan, approaching with a triumphant smile. And thank you for confessing everything on camera. It will make the Justice Department's work much easier. Mr. Norton's men tried to react, but were quickly surrounded by federal agents. Within minutes, all were handcuffed. Mr. Norton, or rather Gerald Harper, fugitive from justice for fraud, said the federal marshal, you're under arrest for corruption, conspiracy, making threats, and attempted destruction of evidence. Tommy ran to hug Nathan, while Thunder neighed loudly as if he knew the battle had been won. Mr. Blackwood, we did it. We sure did, my young friend. Nathan hugged the boy. You were braver than many grown men. In the days that followed, the story became national headlines. The evidence collected by Nathan led to the arrest of dozens of people, including politicians, businessmen, and corrupt public officials. The illegal mining scheme was completely dismantled. As a reward for their crucial collaboration, the Walker family received a significant amount from the Witness Protection Program, enough to pay off all their debts and modernize their property. But the greatest reward came in an unexpected form. Nathan, grateful for saving his life and impressed by the family's courage, decided to move to the region and establish a partnership with the Walkers to transform the property into a sustainable agriculture project. Thunder chose you, he said to Robert one sunny afternoon, watching Tommy play with the horse in the pasture. And I've learned to trust his instincts. Sarah smiled, seeing her son teach Thunder to fetch hidden objects, a game that had become a tradition between them. Who would have thought that an injured horse would change our lives like this? She murmured. It wasn't the horse that changed our lives, said Robert, putting his arm around his wife's shoulders. It was the decision not to turn our backs on someone who needed help. Tommy approached running, with Thunder right behind him. Dad, Mom, Thunder found another treasure. He showed a shiny quartz piece that the horse had unearthed. I think he'll keep finding special things forever. Nathan laughed, stroking Thunder's muzzle. He certainly will, son. Horses like this are born to find treasures. But the greatest treasure he found was a family who recognized the value of loyalty and courage. The sun was setting over the valley, but this time it didn't bring the melancholy of scarcity. It brought the promise of better days, built on the solid foundations of justice, friendship, and the certainty that when you do the right thing, the universe conspires to make everything work out. Thunder whinnied softly, no longer looking east with longing, but toward the future with hope, alongside his new family who had learned that life's greatest treasures aren't found in the ground, but in the hearts of people who choose goodness, even when all